I don't think they can hear you. Hi. I'm Ava.
Scott. So, you don't need the suit to, go through things.
No.
Hello everyone! So I learned about this One Marvelous Scene YouTube collab where people were making videos of Marvel movie scenes they really love and putting them in a playlist together. And I had a couple of thoughts. First I thought, ooh, that might be an opportunity to grow our little channel. And then I thought I should be ashamed of myself for thinking like a shameless view whore, and that I'm not really the right person to contribute to this collaboration, because I'm one of those contrarian pricks who's getting burnt out on superhero movies in general, and Marvel movies in particular, and probably will stop watching them after Endgame. Besides, the Marvel movies have been talked about to death on YouTube. What do I have to add to the conversation? But I checked out one of these One Marvelous Scene videos by Infinity Inc. Comics and actually quite enjoyed it. He chose to focus on Justin freaking Hammer in Iron Man freaking 2 of all things, and that I think is why I liked it so much. It wasn't an obvious thing, it was obscure, and I realized there actually was something I could talk about. Something a little less appreciated and more esoteric. See, I missed most of the third wave Marvel movies, but on a long plane ride recently, I happened to catch Ant-Man and the Wasp. And while I agree with most people that the movie is kinda mediocre, one thing in the movie stuck with me that I really liked a lot, and that's the character of Ghost, particularly her introduction. Perfect! I'll do a video on the least cared about Marvel movie. Contrarian cred intact. And to be even more contrarian, I'm going to bend the rules of this collab a bit. Because Ghost's introduction is really two scenes. 1.5 of those scenes are great, and the main reason I like the character so much, the other half of the second scene is not so great. In fact, it's kinda bad. I promise what I'm talking about will make sense shortly. The first scene is Ghost's first appearance in the movie. Hope Pym, the Wasp, has just beat up the goons of an arms dealer after he tried to cheat her out of a high-tech gizmo. As she's heading towards the door, this weird flickering gray figure appears and this spooky industrial music starts up. Cue superpowered fight scene. I love how completely out of nowhere this is. Ghost wasn't teased or foreshadowed in any way before this, and the arms dealer's reaction makes it clear this isn't one of his goons. The figure is a complete cipher. You can't even tell if it's a man or a woman in that gray suit. It all makes Ghost very mysterious and intimidating. The fight scene is pretty good too, showing two people who essentially have super not getting hit powers, fighting on fairly even footing. When Ant-Man joins in, he and Wasp gain the upper hand, but Ghost escapes. Scott and Hope call Ghost it sometimes and he sometimes, emphasizing what a complete mystery this villain is. The second scene is Ghost, or Ava's, first speaking scene. There's a scene in between where Ghost takes off her mask, revealing her face, but there isn't really much to it, so I'm not going to talk about it. This is the scene where Ghost is properly introduced as a character. She gets the drop on the three heroes, knocks them out, and ties them to chairs. Scott wakes up first, and the two have a conversation that can best be described as delightfully uncomfortable.
You're funny. I need what's in your head.
Whoa, no touchy. No touchy. No.
Is she coming on to Scott? Or is she just so socially inept that it seems that way? Either way, she's clearly trying to be reassuring, but comes across as weird and creepy instead. She stares a little too intently, her posture's kinda weird. She pauses a lot in between her sentences and phrases, and she kneels down and starts getting touchy-feely for no justified reason. Scott is so apprehensive about it all. It strikes this uniquely tense and awkward tone that's kind of funny without deflating the sense of danger. It's very different from most hero and villain meetings in the MCU. Ghost in the comics is a creepy weirdo who's a fountain of uncomfortable moments for the heroes and villains he interacts with, and while everything else about the character, race, gender, backstory, was changed, this much at least was preserved. And actress Hannah John Kamen plays it up nicely. The scene also establishes a lot about Ava's character in a short period of time with fairly few words.
It just helps me control it. And the pain, supposedly.
Her power is more of an affliction than a gift. She can only control it with a suit, and it causes her a lot of pain. Her frustration and wariness when she briefly loses control shows that she's probably been living with this for a long time. She tells Scott she wants what's in his head, letting the audience know she's after the same thing the Pyms are, Janet Van Dyne. She doesn't say why, but without more information to go on, the best guess is that this has something to do with her condition. Personality-wise, the scene shows she's either very socially awkward, a bit mentally unhinged, or both. She's not evil, but she is broken and emotionally unstable, and she has anger issues stemming from frustration with her situation, as we see when she roughly and violently wakes up Hope and Hank after losing control for a moment. All of these things get confirmed immediately, when they really should have been confirmed slowly as the movie played out. Unfortunately, the scene quickly goes downhill after Hank and Hope wake back up. It turns into a giant exposition dump. Ava's entire life story is shared, as well as the villain's evil plan. It's the opposite of how the scene starts, which showed more than it told and said a lot with few words. This part lasts for way too long, it's boring, and showing a flashback during it doesn't fix the problem, especially since the flashback can be summed up as, "There was a lab accident." Also, why are you telling the Pyms this? Don't you have more important things to be doing? Wouldn't it be better to not reveal your plans? Do you think Hank Pym is going to hear this and be like, "Oh, well, when you put it that way, I guess it's okay if you kill my wife"? To make it worse, the scene is repetitive. Ava says during her dialogue that her powers make it feel like she's constantly being ripped apart and put back together. It's a little more descriptive, but it really doesn't tell the audience anything that wasn't already conveyed in this line.
It just helps me control it. And the pain, supposedly.
When your exposition dump is overly long, the last thing you should be doing is having characters repeat information. It's like the beginning of the scene was written by a writer who understood pacing and conservation of detail, and then the rest of the scene was taken over and finished by someone who didn't. This latter part of the scene should have been trimmed, split up, and spread out more throughout the rest of the movie. For example, instead of Ghost giving Hank her whole backstory here, she could have just told him who her father was, making him go, "Oh crap," and then, when they break out, he could explain who she was to the others. It would make the mystery last a bit longer, and make the exposition dump less brutal. It feels like the screenwriters got lazy, and this part of the scene could definitely have used some rewriting. The beginning is still great though, and combined with the earlier scene, it makes for a fantastic two-tier introduction to a memorable villain who's sympathetic but still threatening. The mask and the person behind the mask. I'd really like to see more of Ghost. I think she's a character with a lot of potential. Unfortunately, we might not get much more Ghost since the reception of Ant-Man and the Wasp was so lukewarm. She'll probably be in Ant-Man 3, assuming there's an Ant-Man 3 to wrap up the series, but I'm not sure if she'll get a prominent position. I'm not sure if that's the best place for the character to shine anyway. What I'd really like to see is Ghost in a Thunderbolts movie. You know, that Marvel Comics series about the team of former villains who become dysfunctional heroes that the comic book Ghost was in. It'd be a nice change of pace from Marvel's Golden Boys to some shadier leads. Two characters who were prominent members of the team in the comics have appeared as main villains in Marvel movies. Both had more attempts to make them fully developed sympathetic characters than most Marvel villains, and both survived the end of their movies. It seems like someone at MCU headquarters is at least floating the idea. Sure, these characters had big changes made to them, but that doesn't make them bad on their own merits. Picture a Thunderbolts movie with this colorful cast of characters. They could use Ghost, Zemo, and, who else is there? Abomination, I guess, if he's still around? And Justin Hammer, why not? Yeah, I could get into that. Thanks for watching, everyone. Comment if you have something to say, whether you agree or disagree with me. Like if you enjoyed, and subscribe and ring the bell if you want to hear more of my angelic voice talking about video games, comics, and maybe occasionally movies. And if you want to make your own One Marvelous Scene video, tweet to The Take on Twitter to get it added to the playlist. Thanks, and have a great day.